All right, let's get started on number 3. Number 3, we're going to learn how to create a Venn diagram, and we're also going to learn a few things about the health of America. So I'm going to go up here and click on just this 2 here, Control Charlie, come on down here, Control Victor, change that to a 3. All right, so starting off with this scenario, we have the number of Americans, and then we start talking about the number of Americans classified as obese with type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and then we're going to start looking at the relationships between obesity, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure. And we're going to do all that with a Venn diagram. All of this information came from government websites where you can click on each of these. At the very end of this problem, we're going to click on this last one and do a little exploration to answer some of our questions. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and insert a Venn diagram. The easiest way for me to explain all this to you is to start with the Venn diagram, which is starting a little backwards, but since I'm teaching you about this, it's going to be easier this way. So I'm going to insert an illustration, and it is going to be a smart art. In my smart art, I'm going to choose relationships, or you could just scroll down. And in my relationships, I will find 2 choices for Venn diagrams. I'm going to choose the basic. It's the one with the more overlapping circles. And I'm just going to hit OK, and there it is. A nice Venn diagram. I'm going to make this nice and big so that you guys can see it. Also, you can have all kinds of choices up here. You can make this look extra neat. So there are different things you can do. I'm just going to keep mine real basic. And now I am going to insert a text box. A couple things I'm going to do. Insert a text box to start with. And I'm going to type Americans in there. I'm also going to select that, make it nice and big. I'm even going to center it inside of my text box here. I'm going to do a couple other things to my text box. I am going to, I just realized some of you may not have a text box option, and I'm going to insert a lot of text boxes on this particular scenario. So one of your options is to go to a Word document or a PowerPoint. Either one will be a fine canvas, and you are going to do the exact same thing. Insert, illustration, go to your smart art, find everything I'm doing, you can do on Word, and on Word you can always use a text box, whether it's abbreviated or not. And then when you're all done, you can copy and paste that into your Excel report. So if that's your way that you can get this done, that is perfectly fine. Okay, so here I have Americans. I'm going to do a couple other things with this box. You see how it's white? I want it to be clear. So I am going to format the shape. Well, even if I don't, I can just go right here to fill, or you can format and go to fill and click no fill. I'm also going to have no outline. So I want it to only say Americans here. I'm going to bring that over here. Now for my entire Venn diagram, see how when I click off of it, the border's gone? I want that border there. So I'm going to right click while I have it selected. I'm going to format this object, and then click on my paint can on the right hand side where it says format shape, and I want a solid line. So I'm just going to click a solid line, and it's a pretty thin line. I'm going to go ahead and make it just a little thicker. And you guys can do all kinds of stuff here. You can change it to be dashes, whatever you decide to do. All right, so here is my Venn diagram. Now I'm ready to put some labels in here. I'm going to have 3 main labels. The first one is going to be the number of obese people, obesity. The second one here, well, on the bottom left, I'm going to use this for my type 2 diabetes. And then my third one is going to be high blood pressure. Now, all of these are way too big, so I want all of this font to be smaller. I think I can just select the entire diagram, go to Home, and click on my font. I'm going to take it, I guess I'll put it at 14. Can you guys still see that? Just make this a little bigger. Because I'm going to put a lot of other information in here, so I'm going to need that space. Now, how many Americans do we have? I'm going to take this data that's listed up here, and I'm just going to make a little place for it here on my Excel. So I'm going to move this out of the way. Oh, see how it's moving, but my Americans is not moving? I'm going to select my Venn diagram, press the Control key on my keyboard, and then select my Americans box. There are other ways you could have done this. Put my weather vane cursor on some line, right-click, go to Group, and group them together. Now I can move this wherever I want to, and it's all connected. All right, so right here, I'm going to record my information on my Excel. I have my number of Americans. I'm just going to cut and paste all this, so I'm going to actually just pause the video and cut and paste all this right in here. Okay, so I have cut and paste all that information into my Excel. I know it's very small and you cannot see it. Let's have a quick talk about this information. First of all, I have my number of Americans. So the whole entire population is 326,213,213. And that is all of this. So I can't just add that right here to Americans because that would be just this part. Every single number that I put into this entire diagram has to equal that number of Americans. And then I have my people who are classified as obese, and those people go into this circle. But some of the people go into these other parts of the circle. For example, I have 81% of the people with type 2 diabetes also have obesity and high blood pressure. So 81% of all the people with type 2 diabetes will go right here in the middle. I also have people with obesity and high blood pressure. They will go in this overlapping piece between obesity and high blood pressure. So if they are obese with high blood pressure but do not have type 2 diabetes, they would go right here in this little section. If somebody has type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, but they are not obese, they would go into this little section. But if they have type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity, they would go into the middle section. Do we get it? All right, now, the scary part of this scenario that people don't like is the notation that we use. So I'm going to go ahead and create myself a chart using all of this data here. My chart is going to start off with Americans. And I'm just going to go ahead and start listing these. I'm going to keep them actually online with what they are. So I'm going to move this down one. All right, so my next piece is going to be obese. Type 2 diabetes, and I'm going to initiate that or abbreviate that as type 2 diabetes. I'm going to call this high blood pressure. And then here's where we start to get into some unfamiliar notation. Right now, this particular cell is going to record the number of type 2 diabetics with diabetes. So type 2 diabetes and obesity. Sorry, I meant to say type 2 diabetes and obesity. So I'm going to write this as type 2 diabetes, and I'm going to come over here. There are a lot of different ways to get this symbol. If you can't find it the way I'm about to find it, you can Google it and cut and paste it. But do try to find the proper notation for this. I'm going to go to Insert. I have to use this little slide bar over here. I want to insert a symbol. And in my symbols, I come across all of these things. My symbol that I'm looking for is right here. This is called the AND symbol. The OR symbol is this upside down. And I just found it by scrolling through this. Don't spend way too much time scrolling through it. If you cannot find the symbol, then you can simply, I'll tell you what I'll do. I am going to go back to the original Word document for this. You guys are going to love me for this. Thinking ahead. It's kind of like me coming to you in the future, isn't it? I'm going to take this little symbol I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to post it right here in your original document. It's just going to be sitting here. So if you can't find that symbol, I'm going to save this. Whoops. Save, and I'm also going to save it into the PDF that you're going to use to access this. So I do get a lot of complaints. Folks say I looked for hours for that symbol and I couldn't find it. So there, now you have it. It'll show up when you look at your document. All right, so I have type 2 diabetes and obesity. And for the sake of this, I am going to abbreviate obesity to just be OB. All right, so I have type 2 diabetes and obesity. And then in my next one, I'm just gonna drag this all the way down here because I know I'm gonna keep using my and because these are all combinations. So I have type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure on this one. Is that right? And then my next one, I have obesity and high blood pressure. So I guess it doesn't really matter which side that's on. And then for the last one, I have all three. So for the last one, I have type 2 diabetes, obesity, and I'm just going to copy and paste my little and symbol here, and high blood pressure. All right, so all three is going to go right here in this center piece, remember. Now, I know you're thinking, well, that wasn't that bad for notation, but we're not done yet. I am also going to create, I'm going to make this column just a little bit wider. I'm going to create another column here, and I want to put the number of Americans. So here we're going to have the number of Americans, and on the next cell over, I'm just going to drag that over and change the word number to percents. Percent of Americans. I am going to click these cells, right-click, format, and wrap, as you probably knew I was going to do. I'm going to take my Lima column, my L column, make it a little longer. I'm also going to go ahead and center these things. All right. Now I have some information that I can fill in because I have all this information over here, and whatever I don't have for one, I can find for the other. So I'm going to go ahead and select all this because I like to have my tables with borders on them. I also like my data to be colored so that I can tell which are numbers and which are real data. I guess I'll go ahead and make them blue. I might be getting carried away. But that I don't even like that cell border because it's not part of my chart, but that's okay. Now let's look at the number of Americans that we have. It is this big number here. I'm just going to copy it into this cell. And you will see how the parentheses, the commas go away when I double click it. We're going to try to do some math with this later on, so we can't have those commas there. We'll see if it bothers us or not. All right, now I have the number of obese people is 10.5%. So I'm going to select this whole column here and turn it all to percentages. And so now I know this is 10.5%, which, as you well know, Excel makes up its mind as to when it wants to do it correctly. I'm going to just click on this and give myself another decimal, okay? So that's in the wrong place. I am going to move that, Control X, and move it down one, Control Victor. So I just Control X-ray to get rid of it. See how it got rid of my border? I can just go back and put that in again. All right, what else? The rest of these are given to me in percentages. Is that right, or did I do something wrong here? So this was actually my diabetes, so I'm going to move it down one, 10.5% of the people have diabetes. Obesity actually gave me a number here, so I'm just going to copy this number. And let's see what else we have. We have 32.7%. All right, so I have just figured out why it is doing that. If I click with cursor mode and I put in 32.7, then it acts like I didn't put the decimal in the right place. But if I just simply single click on it without cursor, I can put in 32.7. Cool. All right, and I do need my decimal value there, so I'm going to move that over. Next, I have a whopping 90%. Again, just a single click, 90%, 90%, 86%, and 81%. See how I learned something new right here with you guys right now? A single click keeps me my percentages, and a double click with the cursor mode, it acts like I didn't put the decimal in the right place. Now, let's see how we're going to get the rest of this information. First of all, my percent of Americans, well, this is 100%, right? Because it's all the Americans. So I'm actually going to do this kind of a funny way. This is percentage in this column, so I'm going to put equals this number divided by itself. That actually gives me 100%. I must have not done percentages on those two columns. The next piece, in order to find the percentage, what percent is 93,300,000 of the population? So I'm going to select that number for the obese people and divide it by the total population. See how I did that? Let's just go back and do it again. All right, so I put my equal sign because I want Excel to do some division for me. I select the cell with the number of obese people, and now that number is in my cell. And I'm going to divide that number by the total population. So now I just click that cell. What is that? Kilo 96. So this is the cell, column kilo, row 96, and then I press enter. Very easy. Now let's see how are we going to fill in the rest of this information. The number of people with type 2 diabetes, equal sign, click in that cell, and now I have 10.5% of, that means to multiply, 10.5% of the population. All right, type 2 diabetes, we have 32.7. You put your equal sign, click 32.7 times the total population. All right, now I'm going to show you guys how to do something else cool. I'm actually going to delete what I have in this cell right here. And I'm going to show you, because can you see how we're going to keep clicking over here and then back on population? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you. Since I've already put my formula into this cell, type 2 diabetes, and see the proximity, it has selected the number to the right and then the number 2 above. See that? The number to the right times the number 2 cells above. So if I select this cell with my white cross cursor and then move to the bottom right-hand corner with my black cross cursor and drag it down, what has it done? It has grabbed the number to the right and the number 2 cells up and multiplied them together. Grabs the number to the right and 2 cells up and multiplies them together. But I'm not looking for this number. I need every one of these to be times the American population. So I'm going to undo what I've done and show you guys what's going to happen here. This cell, kilo 96, is not going to change. I don't want it to keep moving down, but I do want it to keep moving down on the column to the right. So I'm going to change right here next to kilo, on both sides of kilo, I'm going to put in a $sign. And that is how we lock a cell. We're going to use this a lot in this class. We're locking in that cell now. Watch what happens. I'm going to select the cell, get my little black cursor, and drag it down. Actually, don't even have to drag it down. I can just double click right here, and it will automatically fill to the bottom of the page there. So now I have the number to the right times the number of Americans. And now you can see that every time it did move down to get the new number to the right, but it stayed locked. I locked this cell on the number of Americans. All right, so what this means is that 90% of the American population is this big number. And for these particular numbers, I don't really care about having the decimal values. So I'm just going to actually go ahead and move my decimal value over. I don't need the decimal values there. We can just round it because we don't have portions of people. I'm still a little concerned because I guess we used this, but it knew that it was a comma and didn't bother us with it when it did the math. All right, fantastic. Our chart is really getting somewhere, but we still have a long way to go. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is add some more columns to our chart. But before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and select some huge amount of space here. We're going to add a few more columns. So just select a big amount of space, right-click, Format Cells, Alignment, and then Wrap. And you can see my wrap has a solid square in here. That just means some of it's wrapped. So unclick that until you get just a check mark. And then click OK. Also, I guess I would not mind centering this stuff. I don't really like all my numbers centered, so I'm just going to select this whole top row and center those things. I like the numbers really to be flush right rather than centered. All right, now I am going to put in my Venn sections, and that's what we're going to have here. All right, folks, I have found an error. So let's go back and fix the error rather than starting the video over again. So our problem is where I took some of this information. Remember how we locked in that number of Americans cell? Well, all of these percentages were not coming from the number of Americans. So let's come back to our list here and look. I actually got quite far. I had to go undo everything and come back here. So this is just a small correction. Where we have American type 2 diabetics who are classified as obese. So 90% of type 2 diabetics are obese. So here where we have type 2 and obesity, the mistake is that this should have been 90% of people with type 2 diabetes, not 90% of the entire population. All right, the next one was that we had 86% of obese people have high blood pressure. So 86% of the people who are obese also have high blood pressure. So here I have 86% of people who are obese. Then for all three of them, it said that 81% of type 2 diabetics are obese with high blood pressure. So this is actually 81% of type 2 diabetics. So now our numbers should be correct. Another thing that I want to change while I'm at it is I would like to call this number of Americans in millions. And then what I'm going to do is change this to be all of my numbers that are in the millions. So in this case, I hope you can see this is 326,213,000. So I can call this 326.2 million and just delete the rest of that. Okay, 326.2 million. And now all of my numbers changed except this one, which I'm going to call this one 93.3 million. And the reason I'm doing this is because when I start doing all the math over here, I'm going to end up with all kinds of huge numbers, and it kind of made me feel dizzy. And that's how I found this other error, because I didn't like all those big numbers. So I'm going to select this column, the set of data, and I want to see at least one decimal point. So now I know I have 326.2 million, 93.3 million. All right, let's keep moving along. Let's get over here now and do some math so we can find the numbers to put into our Venn diagram. We're going to let Excel do the math for us. For our first part down here, we're going to do this all backwards because we cannot subtract these things out until we know what they are. So we're going to start all the way at the bottom. We know that there are 27.7 million people with all three, right? Because our type 2 diabetics was 10.5% of the population, and then the people with all three was 87% of those diabetics. I think that was diabetics, yes. So now I have my number of obese and high blood pressure people is 80.2. Whoops, I need to put an equal sign over here. 80.2 minus the number of people who have all three. Remember how we're just looking for this section. I'm not going to go over all that again, but remember how we're just looking for just this piece. All right, next I have all the people with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, 293.6 million people, wow. And I'm going to subtract out the number of people who have all three. Again, that's type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. So right here, I'm looking just for this lighter, medium colored section and subtracting out the darker one. Now I want type 2 diabetics and obese. So if anybody's type 2 diabetic and obese, that's 30.8 million, but we have to subtract out the number of people with all three. Now things get interesting because now I have my people with high blood pressure. Okay, I just found another error right here, my type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. That should have been, you guys could have maybe caught these errors before me, which is really extra awesome. So we have type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, 90% of American type 2 diabetics. So this should have been 90% of our type 2 diabetics, not of the entire population. I thought that number looked a little too big. All right, now we're on track. And you see how it instantly changes my information over here. Look, if I go back, see it instantly changes the information to be correct. So that's pretty cool. All right, now we have high blood pressure, 106.7 million. Need my equal sign there. Minus all the people who have anything to do with high blood pressure. So minus the people with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, minus the people with obesity and high blood pressure, and minus the people with all three. Because remember, for this particular piece, we're looking for just only people with high blood pressure. So that means I have to subtract out these three pieces of the diagram. I have people with type 2 diabetes. Keep forgetting that equal sign, don't I? People with type 2 diabetes minus people with type 2 diabetes and obesity, minus people with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, minus people with all three. I have the people with obesity. 93.3 million Americans are classified as obese, which for that study, I think it was 40 pounds over the normal weight. What is the normal weight? I can actually show that to you here in just a second. Let's look at this. All right, so the number of obesity minus the number of people with type 2 diabetes and obesity. So right here, I hope I have all these numbers correct. And then minus obesity and high blood pressure. And then minus all three. All right. Okay, I did find, it looked like I had another error right here. I subtracted some cell down here that was not my all three. So I'm just going to change that there. Okay, now we are on track. The next thing I'm going to do is add another column, because when we do finally create this Venn diagram, we're going to have two of them. We're going to have one with our numbers, and then we're going to have another one with percentages. So I'm actually going to just bring this cell over here, and now we're going to have percentages of Americans in the Venn diagram. Just write percent of Americans in Venn diagram sections. Well, what about our Americans without anything? Well, check it out. My Americans without anything is the number of all the Americans minus, you ready? This is fun. The sum, I just type in an S, S-U-M. See my sum right here when that comes up? I'm just going to double click it. And then I'm going to just select all these numbers. See how I just selected them? So the reason that that happened is because of the way that this is overlapping. So I'm going to close it out. And my sum is going to, I just choose these numbers. close my parenthesis and hit enter, but I did not get this one in here now. I'm going to show you here in a second. So when I did my sum, it went from November 98. 98 is right here at type 2. I also needed to include this row where it says obesity, but I was not able to get to it because of the way this was dropping down. So I'm just going to change this number right here from November 98 to November 97. If you're able to select yours, awesome. If not, you can just do it like this. Now, I know how many people are going to go into this section where the Americans who have none of these symptoms. So let's look, before we move on ahead, let's look at our percentages. I am going to go ahead and border that in. And now I want to find my percentages. So in order to do that, I simply decide the percentage these Americans are of the full population. So if you remember, we said we divide that. So I'm going to divide the number of Americans without divided by the number of total Americans. Now for this one, we really do want to lock in our kilo 96 cell. So I'm just going to put a $sign on each side of the kilo there. And all that means now is that I can drag this down, and Excel will keep dividing each of these numbers by that locked cell, which is the population. I know we did this before. We didn't really need the population, but this time we do. I am also going to select, I guess I could do that later. I'm going to just get my little black cursor. I can either drag it, click and drag, or I could just double click, and Excel will fill it in. Everything's selected. I only want to see a couple decimal values here. So I'm going to move this to be 3 decimal values, and then I'm going to change it to percentage. I guess I'm going to have to still move it. All right. Yay, looky there. We have all of our percentages, and everything is labeled with a good decimal value. So now let's see how this is going to fit into our Venn diagram. All right, I'm just going to move this Venn diagram over here right underneath our chart so that we can see everything clearly. And let's see if we could get this just a tiny bit bigger. All right, our first Venn diagram is going to be the number of Americans. And the number of Americans here is number of Americans in millions. We can't forget that. And our number here is 206.1. Also, I'm going to make this drop box bigger. Okay, now let's look at our number of obese Americans. We had 206, oh no, that's 10 million. And I can type million there if I want to. And then we had the number of people in America with just type 2 diabetes. And that number is 0.3 million. The number of people in America with just high blood pressure was 23.3 million. All right, now I am going to insert 4 text boxes. Again, if you guys can insert a text box, you'll do this whole thing over on, a Word document, your Venn diagram, or PowerPoint. So I am going to insert a text box. And in my text box, I am going to write, let's see, where do we start here? 3.1. And it looks like I'm going to go ahead and center this. We're going to have 2 of those. See how my text box is white? I'm going to actually make this bold and a 12 font. My text box is white, so I am going to right click and format. Many ways to go about this. And I just want to click on try to make this look like how it might look for you. You're going to click on your paint box. Whatever's up here, you might see different things. So you're going to click on your paint box, fill, and no fill. I just want this to be see-through. So this is 3.1 million. And this goes where? 3.1 million went into type 2 diabetes and obesity. So type 2 diabetes and obesity went right here. I'm actually going to select my whole Venn diagram and hit bold. Wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but I think I can just select these circles and hit bold. Can I do that? Yep. All right, so try to make everything bold just to make it look nice. Also, this little box that I have here with my 3.1 million, I can't get to it now. It's a little bit hard because the other stuff is in front of it. But this 3.1 million, I also don't want it to have any borders. So I'm going to go back and right-click, Format. And sometimes if you right-click on just the right spot, it will give you that. If you right-click on the actual line, you can take off your outline. I want no line around that. You could also right-click and Format Shape. All right, so 3 million goes in there. I'm going to Control Charlie, Control Victor, because I think I have two 3.1. Another one goes in type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. So I have another 3.1 million right there. Maybe I just want to write mil here. Since these are small spaces, I can do that. It's my design, so I can do whatever I want, and so can you. All right, I'm going to Control Charlie, Control Victor this again, and find out what number goes into obese and high blood pressure. And that is 52.5. Wow. 52.5 million people suffer from both obesity and high blood pressure. And I say suffer from obesity. Many people don't have a choice in that matter. We have all kinds of reasons people are obese. It is not always like you think it is. All right, and then we have here for all three is going to be 27.7 million. And for this one, I might even make my box look like that. A little bit bigger. Explore with your commands to make things look nice and neat. Yay, okay, now I know that 10 million people suffer from obesity without having the other three ailments. So that's the kind of information I get from this Venn diagram. Okay, now that we have our numbers all nice in our Venn diagrams, we're going to look at the percentages. And when we talk about percentages, we're actually talking about probability, the probability of these events occurring. And Venn diagrams are often used in probability. So let's see exactly what I can do here to not have to recreate all of this again. I'm going to select my Venn diagram, Control Charlie, select off my Venn diagram, and Control Victor. All right, so we're missing a couple things. We don't have our little text boxes that we made, but that's okay because I am going to put those in myself. I tried to group them. I didn't have any good luck with it, so I'm just going to forget about trying to group them. But I had tried to select all of this and then right-click and group it, but that was not working out. I tried a few different ways. So let's get this Venn diagram. And now I would kind of like to make this smaller, but I really can't because you see how my numbers don't move with it. So there are better ways to do things than the ways I do them, but I only know how to do certain things. So we just kind of go with what I can do until you teach me how to do it better. So now we have our Venn diagram for percentage of Americans. And we can say percentage, but what if we said probability? Can we say that? The probability of Americans in millions. Well, what is the probability of being an American out here in the universe? I wonder if I can make this. I guess I can do that. I just have to move all the other stuff to go with it. But you guys certainly do not want to watch me do that, do you? All right, looks like I got it somewhat on there enough. And I'm going to make this one smaller before I add the labels. I'm going to just select these three, or four, I mean, these four text boxes that I made. I select one, I hold the control key down on my keyboard and select the rest, and then I'm going to control Charlie, control Victor. Now, while all of these are still selected, so you do not have to move them individually, get your weather vane cursor on one of them, and then simply just move them all over here. Hey, yay, look how easy that was. But now I have to change all this stuff to percentages. So for my probabilities of Americans in millions, I no longer need the millions here because this is just probability of Americans without. This one is without. And this is going to be 63.2%. And we can say percentage or probability, but I do want you guys to realize that this means probability. Now, for our number of obese people, the probability of being obese without, the probability of being obese without having diabetes or high blood pressure is only 3.1%. So that's what that means. The probability of being an obese American without type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure, you only have a 3.1% probability of that being you. What about the probability of being an obese American with type 2 diabetes? Or should we just kind of go in order of our chart here? I think that would actually make it easier. Type 2 diabetes, we have a, wow, look at that, a 0.01%. 0.01% chance of having type 2 diabetes without being obese or having high blood pressure. The probability of having only high blood pressure as an American is a 7.2% chance of having just high blood pressure without being obese or having type 2 diabetes. All right, now we're going to look at our combos here. What's next? We have type 2 diabetes and obesity is 0.9%. So type 2 diabetes and obesity here is 0.9%. The probability of having obesity and high blood pressure. So what's next here? Type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure is also 9%. And then the probability of having obesity and high blood pressure is 16.1%. And the probability of having all three is 8.5%. So as an American, you have an 8.5% chance of having all three of these ailments. As an American, you have a 7.2% chance of having only high blood pressure without diabetes or obesity. So that's how we look at probability with a Venn diagram. We do have one more piece to this assignment. We are going to click right down here on this chart for obesity in the United States. Remember, I promised that we were going to look at one of these charts. And we're going to, because part of your report is going to include this information. The probability of these ailments happening to you are listed here. But if you live in different states within the country, the probability changes for you. So if you look at these, for example, if you lived in Colorado, the probability of being obese with high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes is much lower than if you live in Arkansas. So you can see that these states here show, this shows the percentage of people in these states with obesity, being an adult, an obese adult. So the probability of being an obese adult is much higher if you live in one of these states. And if you look at the other charts on our assignment page, you will also find this information for some of these other things. Here's for type 2 diabetes. It will show us for the different states, the probability of having type 2 diabetes is actually much higher in Arkansas than it is, again, in Colorado. Colorado seems to be a pretty healthy state. You can see that nothing in the US is green. You have to actually move to some different countries to find green. So use these charts to discuss with us the different probabilities of being just an American with any of these ailments, and then what's going to be the difference if you live in some other state. Enlighten us as to how the results could be different if results derived from your state versus more likely and less likely states. In other words, the probability greatly increases in these dark purple states and decreases in the lighter states. So talk to us about that in your report. You're going to insert a text box, and in that text box is going to be your report. Okay, so I will be looking forward to reading your reports. Make sure that you include all of the information that is asked for in the question over here. Here's everything that should go in your report. At least 5 sentences. If you do more, absolutely fabulous. And let's move on to number 4.